Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
And here we are, another edition of Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, the podcast that everybody knows and loves, at least we hope. Talking today, right now, with Mike Steeves. And currently, Mike, I understand you live in Montreal, is that right?
That is correct, Dennis. Montreal, Quebec. Yeah, right by the canal.
Okay. Is Carey Price going to come back this season?
I hate, we're getting into the hard stuff right at the beginning, Dennis. I don't watch hockey.
Okay.
It usually comes up like about a year or two into a relationship, like things are going well. And then they're like, oh, what do you think of the Habs? And then I have to reveal that I don't pay attention. And then that's it. Either I get fired from whatever job I'm working at or the relationship ends. It's a problem.
Oh, well.
I should probably start paying attention.
I
gotta hope so. I have at least paid attention to Carey Price's issues. I know he's had some trouble. So, hoping he comes back.
I know. Yes, I know. Me too. So there you go. Well, we'll get that out of the way. So that's it. We've broken the ice, so to speak.
There we go.
Mike Steeves is with us. He's got a couple books out. The first one was Giving Up, an award winner. The latest one is Bystander. But Mike, you were born in Nova Scotia. Now you're in Montreal. So what prompted that move?
What happened? I enrolled at Concordia University. I was born in Glasgow, Nova Scotia. I spent a year there. I don't recall that time. And then formative years were spent in Moncton, New Brunswick. Did my undergrad at Dalhousie University. And then I heard about a writing program at Concordia University. Was excited to try it out. So I enrolled in their undergrad program, did a year of that, really enjoyed it. And I don't know, just didn't leave, Dennis. I just never left.
You didn't leave. Good.
And so here I am.
Here you are. So Concordia University, tell us about that. Is it right in downtown Montreal?
That's right, yeah. Actually funny, it's funny to me. I don't know if it'll be funny to you or to anybody who listens, but when I first moved, I worked for Via Rail for a bit before I moved to Montreal, and I did the Halifax to Montreal run. And there was a layover in Montreal. Yeah, that's right. There would be a layover on Tuesday or whatever. It's not important. And so I would stay on Sherbrooke, which is, big Golden Mile or whatever they call it, fancy part of Montreal downtown. I'd stay at this hotel right across the street from this big, beautiful campus. And I was like, wow, it's gorgeous, And then decided I wanted to apply to Concordia, and I read in their literature at the time. And this is way back in the bygone era of 2001 or 2. So, I don't know, I probably had to pay for the internet back then, and so I probably never went on it. But either way, long story short, I read that Concordia had the largest downtown campus in Canada or something like that. So I assumed it was the one that I've been looking at, right across from Sherbrooke. This is not to slag Concordia, which is a wonderful school. But at the time, what happened basically is I realized that, in fact, that was McGill that I was looking at, and that the Concordia campus was a little bit further away from McGill, and maybe not so, how shall we put it, not so magisterial, as it were. It's grown. The campus has, there's been quite a few new buildings at Concordia since I went. But when I went, it was one big building, the hall building, there was a library building, and then there is a beautiful campus actually in the NDG neighborhood of Montreal, that is formerly the Laval College that then, amalgamated with Concordia. And so, yeah, anyway, I can't even remember what the original question was. It's a nice school. I went for a year in the undergrad, and then I enrolled into an English master's program. And I did that for a couple of years, and then that was it.
That was it. Now, you grew up, you said your formative years in New Brunswick, Canada's only bilingual province. So
yes.
I'm assuming you speak a bit of French?
I do. But so, yes, it's true. Moncton, New Brunswick is a very bilingual town. I somehow managed to remain ignorant of that growing up, despite having many friends with the last names of like Legier and LeBlanc. I just thought that was like, whatever, that's normal. And don't get me wrong, I took French immersion. And, you know, when I would have summer jobs, they would say you have to be able to speak French in order to say, like, would you like fries with that or what have you. And then in French, so the honest truth, Dennis, is like I had some French when I moved to Montreal, but not much. And then I managed to maintain that not much status for quite a few years until I started a family. And I have kids now, and they go to French school, and so it's been sort of like, you know, I gotta figure this out because they're, you know, they're bringing home the homework and that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's becoming apparent. So I don't know what I'm talking about. So I have improved on it over the years, and it's not too shabby.
Okay,
it's not great,
but
it's not bad.
You get by. So it's voulez-vous pommes frites? Oui.
Yeah, sure. Yes, very good, Dennis. Very good. That's it.
That's it. I was talking earlier today with Olympic hockey goaltender Sammy Jo Small, who went to French immersion school all through her school life in Winnipeg. So she was rattling off the French, and I couldn't keep up with her at all, but that's life. We're talking with Mike Steeves about actually writing and the first book, Giving Up. Now,
yeah.
That came out in 2015. It was a finalist for the Concordia University First Book Award. Now, the next one is Bystander, so there's a bit of a gap there. Was that deliberate, or it just takes you a long time to write a book?
Takes me a long time, Dennis. It was not deliberate. I mean, the truth of the matter is, after publishing the first one, like, I wasn't certain that I would ever necessarily do another one. I don't do it for like a living. I don't do it for, you know, financial remuneration. So it's a matter of like, is this important enough to me to spend the considerable amount of time it's going to take to actually realize this thing? So after I finished Giving Up and it was published, I worked on something for about a year that I then abandoned. So that really set me back. And then this manuscript, the Bystander first draft, was actually completed in 2018. But by no means like was that, you know, ready for prime time or anything like that. It was just a first draft. And then my wife and I, we were blessed with twins, and that also set me back a little bit. While we were, you know, the first year was pretty rock and roll. And then, yeah, so the manuscript, I submitted it to my publisher in 2018. They must have got back to me sometime in 2019. And then, like, you know, I don't know how much you're aware of this or how much listeners would be interested in this, but like, publishing is tough, you know, and I don't mean for me, I mean for the publishers. And they oftentimes, you know, they have people sending them stuff like, and they've got, you know, stuff that they would like to do, but they've got a full plate. And so I'm speaking on their behalf. I don't know if this is true, but when they accepted it, they said like, we'll do it in a couple of years. And initially I was like, oh no, I would love to hurry this one out. And then in retrospect, I really appreciated that extra time, because the condition that the manuscript was in initially wasn't tip top. So by having those 2 years to work on it, I was able to get it into much better shape.
Right. And Book Hug Press is your publisher. How did you come in contact with Book Hug Press?
That was with the first one. A friend of mine, actually an editor there, who had just started there and said, that he was looking for new fresh talent. And so my friend was like, he's not very fresh, but nobody's heard of him. And so I sent along my manuscript, and to my surprise, they said, yeah, we'll do this. And it was just like that. It makes it sound easy, but I'm skipping the whole part where I had sent manuscripts out for years, and people said, nah, I don't want to do this. So I skipped to the happy ending. And that was how I started working with Book Hug. And this is my second book with them. So, they're wonderful.
Yep. And your style is very different. You have big paragraphs and long sentences. Is that just the way you write, or is that kind of a style you sort of cultivated purposely?
So I'm mindful whenever, I don't do many interviews, but I'm mindful that when I do chat about this, I have an inclination or a temptation to pretend I know what I'm doing. And the truth is, so just everything I say now should be taken with a grain of salt, because I don't really know all of the sort of twists and turns and decisions and trial and error that went into getting to a place where I write the way I do. Obviously, there's the influence of the literature that I like. Increasingly, I love stuff like that has sort of a breathless quality to it.
Yep.
And I'm calls coming in. Sorry, Dennis. I don't know if you can hear that on your side. I'm just gonna. How do I do that? Okay, I ended that.
Oh, okay.
Are you still with me, Dennis?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay, sorry about that. So there's the writers that I like, the style that I find in some contemporary stuff that, as I said, has that breathless quality to it. That's sort of just kind of never ends until it does end. And then I think also, so I alluded earlier to the whole period wherein I was submitting stuff to publishers or magazines or what have you, and they were saying, no, thank you. And I think, when I started trying to do this for the first however many years that I was writing, I was trying to write something that was, I don't want to say conventional, because that makes it sound like, it's not challenging to write this way, but with less of those long paragraphs, less of those long sentences, more, spaced out on the page with healthy chunks of, dialogue attributed and all that sort of thing. Yeah. And I don't know if I was all that great at it, was one thing. I think it was really tough, and I think I struggled to sort of write in that way because it just wasn't maybe a natural fit for me. And then what happened was I kind of made a conscious decision to just be like, okay, well, I'm not really going to try to write for a publisher or for a magazine or to get published. I'm just going to write. And that's when I started working on giving up. And initially it was just like 1 or 2 pages. And then I just kept on building on it from there. And what happens is I'm writing longhand in notebooks. Yep. And so I don't really bother doing anything as far as punctuation or paragraphing goes. I just write.
Right.
And with giving up, we left it as is. I've heard from some people that they wish that I had introduced some breaks, but my editor liked it that way. I was attracted to it. I had read books that looked like that, and I had no issue with it. And so that one looked the way it did. And with this one, I did actually, as I was writing it longhand, even though it's long sentences, pages where there's no paragraph breaks, I still did introduce them. It just happened naturally as I was writing it that it was like, this is a break. So, I guess the answer is like, I kind of trust I trust that I've been doing this long enough, even though, it's only my second book. I've been trying to do it long enough that I kind of trust in my practice, as it were. Like I just work at it. and whatever shakes out on the other side, I then try to hammer into some sort of acceptable form.
I see. And that brings us to my next question. Speaking about your style and your literary background, what kind of books did you like growing up and that you still read? Are there certain authors you're into, as they say?
Oh, wow. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. It's a pretty standard question for a writer, and every time I get asked it, I'm just I'm like, I don't remember what I read today. When I was growing up, I loved to read, and I was kind of known for it. Staying up late, flashlights, and all that sort of thing. My parents being like, "What are we going to do? This is a problem." And it was, standard fare. Man, I loved Stephen King. I loved some James Clavell. I don't know if you ever dipped into him, Dennis.
Shogun.
Like Shogun.
Right.
Oh, love Shogun so
I got
much.
to the last... sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go. Go.
I was just saying I read Shogun all the way through until the last 10 pages and I gave up. I just said, I don't like this anymore. I don't know why I even bought this book. 10 pages to go and I quit. So
you got so far though.
I know.
mean, now that anyway, I don't even remember what happens at the end.
No,
and I'm sure, this is no disrespect to Clavell. Like, I'm sure there's parts of that book that probably wouldn't, play well nowadays. But I wasn't necessarily. I was not aware of that sort of stuff, and I just loved loved big books that by the end of it I felt like I knew something. Even that it was fiction, and I was going around telling people stuff as though it was factual. So I liked Clavell. I liked Michael Crichton.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that guy. I don't read any of these folks now, but they were really big for me. Like when I was a teenager, young kid. It wasn't until university. I went to university, and was it? Yeah. Like even throughout high school, I was still reading those guys. Thought they were fantastic. I read the Celestian Prophecy. I was going around telling everybody about that for a little while. I thought you could see energy and that sort of thing. So I was a young, impressionable reader. And then I went to King's College in Halifax for my undergrad. And they have this program there, the foundation year program, where you have to read, part of the Western canon. You read classics from the Western canon. So you read like Gilgamesh, you read, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and on from there. You read Goethe and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And so that was revelatory for me. I remember actually very vividly, my dad just, and it's not that I'd never been exposed. And again, I don't want to, this is not a knock against King or Clavell or any of those guys. They do great work, but it is, it's genre fiction and that sort of stuff. And, which is fine, but I'd never been exposed to this sort of thing, whatever this was. And I remember my dad coming to me, you should probably read a bit, from their lists at King's before you show up on the first day, just to get an understanding of what you're getting into.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I'm like a big reader.
Right.
Like, look, I just read it. Like, this is no problem. And I remember I read like a prose translation, which now in retrospect, I'm like, why the heck did they put a prose translation of the Iliad on the syllabus? But they did. And so I read this prose translation of the Iliad, and I was like, I'm so screwed. I have no idea what is going on. And it was that, though. It was, I think more than anything, it was like the not having any idea what was going on. And I wanted to know what was going on that really set me on, trying to figure out what these books were all about, And so to actually answer the question you asked, it was there. I would say when I was like 18 at King's, reading those writers, and those are the guys and the ladies, although of course there were less ladies when it came to the ancient Greeks that I was able to read, aside from Sappho. But those are some of the books that are still with me, that I will still go back to on occasion to try to, I'm still trying to figure it out.
Gotcha. And we're talking with Mike Steeves. We'll get around to why we called in the first place, was to talk about the latest book, Bystander.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's about a guy who doesn't spend much time in his apartment. He flies around the world, lives in fancy hotels, and then when he comes home this latest time, and he is reminiscing and ruminating and smoking dope and watching, what does he call it, exclusive TV or something like that?
Prestige TV.
Prestige TV, right. So, do you know anybody like that who has that kind of a job, or did you just make it up?
Do I know anybody that has that kind of job? I mean, yes and no. Like, I'm sure if it was like, oh yeah, this guy I know, Gary has a job like that, he'd probably get back to me and say like, that is not what my job is like. I don't even really describe what the job is.
Right.
It's just he's a fancy kind of executive. He spends a lot of time on the road, so to speak, in these exotic mega cities. And he, at some point in time, I think he does reveal that he works in sales. I think another time he says finance. So I have met folks that have had jobs that sometimes, it wasn't always the case, but at certain points in time in this job or in this career, wherein they were kind of in a strange sort of limbo. Like maybe they were part of a department that then got absorbed into another department. Like there can be all sorts of kind of structural reasons why this may happen to an employee, but they basically get like kind of cut loose, but not fired. It's bizarre. And I have sort of witnessed this take place, and so yeah, I thought, I don't know. Again, like just to go back to my original caveat, I don't know how much forethought goes into this book. I didn't sort of sit down and say like, I want him to be this sort of professional or that sort of professional. It just developed as I was writing it. I think what I can say is that I consciously decided that he would be a person of considerable means who was nevertheless choosing to live in a place that was well below those means. And I don't even know why I made that decision, but I just wanted that thing in the book. And the other sort of stuff maybe flowed from that.
And when I'm reading it, I'm thinking Vancouver, and then when you mention Metro, I go, oh, well, he's basically setting it in Montreal, I guess, is sort of I tip my hand a little bit there, because you're right, I never say explicitly what city it is. Right.
That is deliberate. I like that, because as you just gave away, it's like, you get to kind of make it your own, depending on what your sort of experience is. My editor throughout, though, was like, well, we're going to have to, get some details down, like as far as the kind of architecture of his apartment, like how it's structured, what the floors are, all that sort of thing. And certain things are kind of typical of Montreal. If I was being honest, sometimes, I had a sort of fantasy Montreal in my head as I was working, other times not. So it's true, while I use the word metro, it would be a misrepresentation of me to say like that it is, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Montreal, and that I'm keeping it from you. It's more that I'm just like, it's a city. And
a big city.
It's a big city.
Oh, okay.
It has art galleries. It has that sort of stuff. It has a metro system, and because I live in Montreal, as I said, I tip my hand. My wife actually pointed that out. She's like, "You're saying Montreal. Nobody else says that." And I was like, "Well, he does travel a lot.
That's right.
Maybe
could have been France. Could have been Paris.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
But it isn't. So the main character is a guy named Peter, and like you said, he's got this luxury lifestyle when he's away from home, if you want to call it home, his pied-à-terre, so to speak. And but he really doesn't want to get involved with anybody or anything. Is that kind of the idea behind the main character? He just wants to be detached.
Yes, that is his main ambition, is basically to have somewhat of a frictionless existence, wherein he can live in a place where he's anonymous in this place, and nobody will say like, "Hey, how's it going, Peter? How are things? I remember last week you weren't feeling well, and this week you're feeling okay." Those sorts of interactions for him are intolerable. He cannot stand them for whatever reason. And so he has remained in this neighborhood that is, as I said, below his means, basically to kind of hide out there. Because if he were living in a neighborhood that was more sort of appropriate to his class, then he would be surrounded by other folks who are in his industry or, within his social spheres. And he might risk actually running into someone who knows him or knows of him, which again would be intolerable to him.
So do you have a goal in writing this book, or was it just dang fun to do?
Certainly, I wouldn't describe it as dang fun. All of these things for me take a lot of work. I don't know. So the goal is basically, for me, I start with some sort of like, I don't know, this is just kind of like an image or an idea that I can't shake. Usually it's been with me for a year or two, long enough that it keeps on cropping up. I keep on thinking about it. I maybe note down in a diary, like Dear Diary, I've been thinking about this thing. And at some point in time, I'm like, all right, well, what would this look like? Like if you were going to dramatize this, how would it play out? And so for me, the kernel of this was the event that, it takes place early in the book, or at least in the first part of the book, wherein, the main character, Peter, comes back to his apartment after being away for a really long time, meets a person who's just moved in or had recently moved in that he's never met before, who is his new neighbor, meets him very fleetingly once, and then never sees him again. And then after 5 weeks, discovers that, in fact, this individual is dead. And it was just that. It was just that scenario. And for me, in my head, it's kind of like an image. I just have this image of them sort of encountering each other on their back balconies. And it was that thing, for some reason, just stayed with me for years. After I had initially heard someone tell me an anecdote that was along kind of similar lines. And after having written one book, I was like, maybe I could do this again. And I could use this image as a launch, or I don't know what it is, the fulcrum on which the whole thing turns, like the central kind of thing, which is just, it's not rocket science. It's just like, it's nuts that someone would live next to someone else and not notice something like that, for a considerable period of time. It's both nuts and also not nuts at all, because, people live like that, right?
Yep.
We keep out of each other's business. There's very good reason for that. And it has its own sort of consequences. And that was it. That was the impetus to write the book. And so it was probably sometimes like the opposite of fun. And nevertheless, like there's, I hear sometimes writers in interviews that say they don't enjoy writing. And then like you read the comments and people are like, why are you doing it? While it may not always have been fun, while it may have been challenging, while it may have been sort of frustrating, well, sometimes I wondered, like, will I ever actually get this done? There is, at this stage, an enormous sense of satisfaction having come through on the other side. Right. Maybe I do it for that reason, Dennis. It feels so good when I stop.
It's like banging your head against the wall. It feels so good when you stop.
Exactly.
Mike Steeves, do you have what kind of daily routine do you have? Do you fit in your writing here and there, or are you structured in your outlook or your habits?
No. Well, I say that, but I don't know. So first of all, I don't write during the day because I have a day job that actually pays for the creative life and for the family that I have. So I wake up. So I'll skip to the part where I wake up, work for 8 or 9 hours, do the kid thing, work, and then the kid thing, and then they go to bed and whatnot. And then the fun begins. And it's around like 9:30 every evening. I try to work myself up. I don't know how other people do this, listen to music, do whatever, read something as a way of kind of like tricking me into writing. It's like, I'm reading a magazine. I kind of feel like writing. I have a hard time like just going to the desk cold, you know? Uh-huh. So yeah, I'll usually kind of ease into it. I write in the evening. And the books are not structured. So, you know, there was another writer that I liked, Alex Haley. Was it Alex Haley who did the Airplane novel?
Oh, Arthur Haley. Yep, Arthur Haley. Yeah.
Arthur Haley, yeah. I remember reading him talk about like how you needed, you know, I forget how he talked about structuring his books, but it was nuts. It would have looked like one of those sort of murder walls, you know, where police are investigating a murder and it's all like whatever, lines between things and that sort of thing. I don't work that way. I mean, I don't write those sorts of books. Who else? I think it's what? Conan Doyle would start at the end and work back way. So, you know, to create that sense of history, that sort of thing. For me, I start with that image, and I try to kind of write through. I have a sense of where I'm going. It's not true that it's like completely like, who knows where I'm going here. I know usually, you know, where I expect to end up. Like as far as the action in the story goes. I don't necessarily know all the sort of places I'm going to stop in along the way to get there. But, you know, for this book, you know, I knew like early on as I was working on it, I'm like, okay, I can feel the three parts to this. I can feel like the discovery in the first part, the sort of like middle section that'll operate as kind of this weird circus. And then the third section is going to be this sort of long slide.
That's right.
And and I could feel that shape to it. And like, I know that's kind of the shape that I want for the book and I'm going to work towards that. And then just how I work is, as I said, for the first draft, it's going to be in longhand. I like doing that because I don't like working at a desk. So if I write in longhand, I can sit out on my back patio if the weather's nice. I can, you know, stretch out on the couch, that sort of thing. And after the first draft, you know, then I'm putting it into a computer and then I'm sort of chained to a desk from that point in time. And yeah, the little bit of writing advice I think that I have found useful. I think it's Hemingway said something to the effect of like, you know, for every day of writing, I think he wrote every day. I'm not always able to get it done every day when I'm working on something, but he said like when you're working, basically like you're working on a Monday, whatever, like leave something to pick up on Tuesday. Like don't, you know, end your paragraph on Monday with like, and it was all a dream, you know, like that shouldn't be the last sentence on Monday. It should be the sentence right before that. It was all a dream. Like he stepped out of the shower and heard a noise, you know, so that you have some momentum going into the following day. And that I have taken to heart and use as a way of keeping my bearings throughout.
You're referencing Dallas there, so you're giving away your age with the...
I know. Well, even though I never really watched it. I never really watched it when I was a kid. But, you know, kind of like the Bible, I just am like, I've absorbed Dallas.
Right. Well, that was when I was in elementary school and junior high school, every third story that somebody wrote ended like that. And then I woke up, it was all a dream.
It's good. Yeah. It's good. It's you can work your way out of a lot by having that sort of safety chute to pull at the end.
Mike Steeves, you have Giving Up, your first book. You have Bystander out now. What's next for you?
Yeah, so I actually am working on something. If I sound surprised, it's because I thought I'd be like, now I'm done. Or that I wouldn't decide to work on anything until after this book had kind of come out and been rapturously received. And, once I finished my 2 international world tours, I'd finally settled down to write the sequel. But I just, it's, because as you pointed out, this one took a little while to come out. And so even though I was redrafting it pretty much, I think it was January, it was finally done. But while the redrafting was going on, I did start to work on something else. I don't know what it is. At this point in time, it's starting as, I can tell you this, Dennis, because I'll forget it afterwards. So they're like, I've never told anybody this, but it's like The Ancient Mariner, but it's like modern. It's just these people. This guy goes to a wedding and someone kind of corners him at the I don't know, the buffet table and just starts telling him the story. It's not about how he shot an albatross, but it's that idea that it's like this man starts telling a story about how he kind of damned himself.
Gotcha.
And you've got this kind of wedding guest who is the, interlocutor who's hearing this story and being like, whoa.
Okay.
And so it's a very it's early stages, early days. They're still at the buffet table. And I don't know I don't know the shape of this one yet. It might be a 2-hander. There might be that sort of Ancient Mariner thing in the first half, and then second half is something else that I've kind of I was talking about, where I get these ideas or scenarios that kind of stick with me for a while. I heard this documentary, I think it was on the CBC way back when, about these siblings who get separated at birth for whatever reason, or when they're really young, and they re-encounter themselves, or they meet each other later in life, right? So they separated at birth, never knew each other, and then, encounter each other when they're adults.
Yep.
And very bizarre things happen as a result of not having been raised as siblings.
Right.
One of which is they experience attraction for each other. And that, of course, is devastating for them and for their families and that sort of thing. And I was very moved by this because on the one hand, it's of course there's this, how shall I put it, lurid component to this story, but the documentary itself and the subjects of the documentary were so, I don't know how else to say, they were so sympathetic, and the problem that they were in is just one that I'm like, well, that's not something that everybody has to deal with,
Yep.
And I think that that to me, I'm like, there's something to that story that I find worthwhile looking at. I don't know how I'll incorporate that into the Ancient Mariner thing, but I'll figure it out, Dennis. I'll work it out.
Okay, and when it's all done, we'll talk again. I want to thank Mike Steeves for being with us, and that'll be great if we can get together next time around.
I would really love it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.